Technical Sergeant Seymour Golub was a combat engineer under Lieutenant General George S. Patton from 1943 to 1945. In that capacity, he defused over 2,000 explosive devices as the Third Army advanced toward Berlin. At Eichstätt, outside of Nuremberg, the site of massive Nazi rallies and the war crimes trials of 1946, Golub masterfully blew open the booby-trapped bank vault containing important Nazi documents, including the infamous Nuremberg laws that institutionalized anti-Semitism in the Third Reich. As well, Sergeant Golub was involved in the recovery of the mysterious holy relic venerated by Adolf Hitler, an ancient spear which the Nazi leader believed endued its owner with supernatural powers. His skill with explosives preserved for posterity these important artifacts and earned him high praise from General Patton. This is his story.
When he was 16, at the World's Fair in 1939-40, he won the title of America's Youngest Inventor at the Westinghouse exhibit. Now, the invention that my dad invented in 1940 is still in use today. And what he invented was the system that turned your car lights automatically when it got dark, using a mercury switch and a photocell. And my father got this really pretty trophy. I believe Westinghouse got the patent on it. But when you go in your cars today, the fact that you don't have to physically turn on the lights was a young Jewish boy from Brooklyn, New York, and that was Seymour Golub who did that. My father mistook somehow the instructions on the IQ test, and in 1940 he was America's brightest boy, but when he took the IQ test he scored under 50 and was found to be an imbecile. So he was found inadequate to be in the service, which was a huge stigma, because in 1942, many people in his neighborhood were all going into service. Everyone was either being drafted or enlisting. So there was a great stigma for my dad walking around the streets of Brooklyn, and these old Jewish women would say, "So what's with you, Seymour, you 4F?" He did everything he could to take the test again, to go back into it. And in 1943, he did get accepted into the Army. And then they issued him a Thompson submachine gun. And he thought, well, what does he need a Thompson submachine gun? Because he said he'll be doing drawings as an engineer. But they left off the term combat engineer. My father was a combat engineer and was trained in the areas of explosives. He was later with Patton's Third Army with the 12th Corps. General Patton was moving very quickly across Western Europe, and he wanted to know what kind of mines his tanks, basically his armor would be facing. Also, what they would do, my father explained to me, is they would booby trap the tank mines by putting anti-personnel devices underneath them. So if there was any motion to if there was an attempt to move a anti-tank mine, the individual doing that would be blown up. Around the city of Le Havre, France, my dad had very special memories because the city of Le Havre had a minefield around it 3 miles deep, which meant there was a mine within 3 meters of each other, within about 10 feet out. You can imagine an entire city with a minefield 3 miles deep. They had captured SS troops, and my dad had incorporated the services, reluctantly, of the SS troops. In fact, my dad told me the story to this one officer. He pulled off his insignia, which was the skull and his other insignias, and took them as a trophy, and said to him, "Ich bin ein Jude," I'm a Jew. And he said if he had a stick or a rock or anything, the hatred he gave my father. But my father was a young guy with a Thompson submachine gun, so told him to get on his hands and knees and taking out the mines. My dad was a very good draftsman. He drew the pictures on every device. Every possible device, he drew the pictures and how to take them apart. And he utilized that to train. Not only did he do it himself, but he trained many other people. Now, pictures were much more important than words because the Allied troops had troops from multiple countries, including Poland and other free peoples. There were the free peoples of Luxembourg and Belgium that came along with the French troops, with the Americans and the British. So his illustrations were key in how to take apart these devices. The mines, my dad was especially instrumental in documenting was the Bouncing Betty, which was a device that you stepped on, a small trigger device that would cause a small explosion to set the main charge up to, it was supposed to come up to around waist height. It would make a horrible sound when it came out of the ground, which would cause the individual to run. When they would run, they would be dead, because what it would do, it would shoot approximately 500 BBs out in a horizontal pattern. The other mine that he worked with was the glass mine, where you stepped on a small plate of glass that would set off a nitroglycerin charge that would later set up the main charge. It was not set to kill the person. It was to basically cause thousands of shards of glass to go into the legs and groin of the soldier who stepped on it, with the intention that if you have one man that is injured, it's better than killing him, because it takes 3 to 4 men to take them out of the field. At the time, there was no X-ray, there was no technology to detect glass. It was a devious device. The Battle of the Bulge, some of the key areas were the town of Bastogne. My father was in these areas. There was something that my father had been a personal witness to, that was the recovery of the bodies of the victims of what was called the Malmedy massacre. My father was there. So whenever there were any Germans that were captured, my father was there to witness that. They lined the Germans up and went through their pockets. And if they found as much as one American cigarette, let alone a cigarette lighter, they shot him in the head. My father had one best friend in the service, and his name was Dieter. And he was a German boy from the Pacific Northwest. He was a tall fellow. He was about 6'1", 6'2". My dad was probably about 5'9", probably like Mutt and Jeff. He was a serious young man, just a wonderful guy, total different background than my dad. But they had a great love for each other. He was the translator. My father was an explosives fellow that could not only take apart mines, but he could also blow up things. So he was enlisted by the services of the CIC to basically blow open safes looking for Nazi documents. And it was about 6 years ago that I was at the Skirble Museum in Los Angeles, the Skirble Cultural Center, where they had the actual copy of the Nuremberg Laws signed by Hitler in September of 1935. And it said that it was found by 3 CIC agents, Dannenberg, Pearl, and Pickens, with the aid of some American GIs. To open a vault without destroying paper was a science. To have just the right amount of explosive at the right spots. The explosive that my dad used, he called it plastique. It's now known as C4, plastic explosive, was the explosive of choice of my father. One thing that was never disclosed at the museum was that the vault had been booby-trapped. It had a timing device. It was called a J-Fader 44. It was a 21-day timing device that you could set from 1 hour to 21 days. And it was set to go off on April 29th. That's when they presumed the Americans would get there. To destroy, they had a massive amount of explosives in that bank. My father was there on April 28th. So within 24 hours of the date of that explosion, when it should have gone off, they recovered the laws. It stated what you could do as a Jew, what you couldn't do. You could not work. You cannot work for the government, certainly. Being a National Socialist country, every job was working for the government. So Jews were basically, it was now legal to exclude Jews from many occupations. My father was at multiple locations. One of them was the cathedral at St. Catherine, where the Spear of Longinus was found, that Hitler really venerated as a cult symbol of power. It was believed that anyone that possessed the spear would be indestructible in battle. And throughout the Middle Ages and throughout the years, it was believed that this was the sword which pierced the side of Jesus and had special mystical powers. Hitler was one that, especially as he was creating the Third Reich, meaning it was the third reign of the Roman Empire, thought if he had that spear, he would be indestructible against any armies in the world, and that with that he could take over the world. The simple stories of what the Sergeant Golubs and the Sergeant Bulows of the world do need to be told, because our young people today are the recipients of the sacrifices of that generation, and many of them don't know it. A lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of misery, a lot of uprooting of people being forced out of homes and continents. And it goes on today where people will do anything for safety, for a job. They will compromise their morals, they will compromise their philosophy for a job, for safety. And there's certain things, like I learned from my grandmother, you don't compromise on. They can take everything from you, they can take your life, but they can't take what's inside of you.